Nairobi. We're dealing with a huge crisis. We have 10 camps. We had 31 camps. We have 10 camps currently. We've lost close to 20 people in the city. Different sectors are expending their budgets. And you know that even convinces us why you don't need necessarily a fund. For instance, today, in all of these camps, people are having lunch and dinner prepared from the county, by dish in a county. You know, that is not in the disaster budget. That is a sector budget within wellness and nutrition. We are repairing 17 bridges that were washed away. These bridges are in different areas. From Madare, there's a bridge that connects Mukuru Kwanjenga and Lunga Lunga, and children study in the other side. There's a bridge between Kiambiu, where I was, and I've gone to all these places, Chair, connecting Viwandani, and there's Kiambiu and Jerusalem. There's so many bridges that we're repairing. The budget to sort out those bridges ideally should come from that sector, not necessarily from disaster. So we feel that that one size fits all approach doesn't work. And so the reason that law has not been implemented since 2015 is that it's actually unimplementable. I wish earlier somebody would...
Order, Governor. I'm looking at the Act.
The current Act.
What is the problem with the proposed council? Let's start from there. Because the council is chaired by the governor.
The deputy governor.
The council shall consist of the deputy governor, who shall be the chairperson, and then there are various CCs, and then there is the county commissioner, the commandant of police, the Kenya Red Cross, representatives of the public, county director for disaster preparedness, etc., with a view to bringing a multi-agency approach towards disaster planning, coordination, and response. What is essentially wrong with that?
Actually, you know, without even calling it a council, we've been implementing that multi-agency approach. In fact, a few weeks or so ago, I had the regional commander, the county commissioner, and all national government administration officers, the regional police commander, and all his people until OCSs and our sub-county structures, they've already been brought together, and we work in that manner. Last week, I was able also now to rope in the parliamentarians, led by the Senator of Nairobi, the MPs. We want to create such structures that now align with our current structure of government. This one that you have doesn't accord to the structures.
Is the problem that it is chaired by the deputy governor?
Of course
or
not.
What is the... I'm trying to understand what the problem is, because we do not want response to disasters and emergencies that follow the whims of the governor. And that is why we say public policy should be predictable and consistent. Yes. And so when you can see the law provides for that kind of council, even if there are agencies that wanted to assist Nairobi City County, they would go to the law and they will see the structures created by the law, and it would provide an entry point. They don't have to look for the governor wherever the governor is. So the law is there. The executive cannot repeal the law. It has to ask the assembly to either repeal or amend. So we've got the law as it is. Please just help us understand why we are not implementing the law as it is. You've given us various scenarios that make it unimplementable. But what is a consistent, predictable structure at the moment for managing disasters and emergencies in Nairobi, if not what is provided for in this act? And I'll allow maybe the senators just to put together their thoughts so that you can have one response. Senator Cherarkei.
Chair, maybe to govern and through you, Chair, at the moment I've heard you are using multi-sectoral approach, especially to address the issue of floods in the city. What is the strength of the legal framework to allow you to be able to proceed with response to emergencies, noting that under, is it section 148 of the PMF Act, the law provides that at least 2% of the county revenue should be used to allocate for emergency disaster response. So what is the fate in your budgeting process, especially on the aspect of 2% of national revenue, because that is what the law says. County revenue, including equitable, shareable revenue, outsourced revenue, among other conditional grants. So what is the fate of that in terms of your budgetary process? Because these are live issues on the floods. And finally, Chair, I saw in your response, Governor, maybe just for the comfort of the committee, it has not been operationalized. I know, Chair, even there is a legislation that was passed by Parliament, I think Access to Information Act, that has never been operationalized, yet we passed in 2016 because of lack of regulations. So what is the status? I've heard you talking about memos to the County Assembly. How soon will this law with the necessary proposed amendments will be operationalized as you have forwarded it to the County Assembly? And finally, Chair, with your indulgence, you have said you are repairing 17 bridges, you are intervening through county in additional county. What is the status? How many people have we lost in Nairobi? How many are in distress with the current floods? And do we see any reprieve in terms of attention that needs to be done, courtesy of this response through the emergency? I thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Senator Fatuma Dulo.
Chair, I still go back to your question. What is the problem with the current legislation? And number two, from my understanding, and I'm sure Senator Governor Sakaja, I remember they have worked on this with Senator Mutula Kilonzo then, on this kind of legislation. The county legislation should be actually aligned to the national proposed legislation. So I think it's good to understand what are the problems in implementing that particular legislation. Thank you.
Senator Sifuna.
Governor, first of all, looking at that cabinet memo that was done by the county attorney, I think she was acting, Christine Reri. It doesn't make clear to me what her problem was with the legislation before the assembly had passed. And she doesn't even propose what remedies. I thought that is the work that she should be doing so that you are able to move forward. Number two, in fact, I agree with my chair that there needs to be a legal framework as opposed to ad hoc conversations, Governor. And I have to protest at this particular point your mischaracterization of the involvement of the members of parliament, because we were essentially there to be briefed by your office on the current situation on the flooding and the response, and for us to be updated on what was going on. It is not an existing structure. This is what the chair was saying, that we should have an existing structure where we know we have regular meetings as an organ or as an entity within the county for us to be able to discuss disaster response. This was just a meeting that we were asked to, and I remember, Chair, I asked for your permission to just dash there and be able to also be briefed on what was going on. Lastly, Governor, are you in a position to give us the current employees that work in disaster management within Nairobi and their and their respective qualifications? Because, as you are aware, we have very serious doubt as to the capacity of some of those officers, that there might be a mismatch in the qualifications of some of those officers and the roles that they have been assigned. So is it possible for you to supply us with a list of every person who works in disaster management, from your fire officers to your disaster management officers, those ones, so that we are able to tell whether they are in fact in the right place in the county administration?
Finally, Senator Methu.
Maybe to follow up on the question that has been asked by Senator Sifuna, in the memo that was done by the county secretary, she actually knows that the law has not been repealed, so the law is valid and is in force. And then your chief officer for disaster management and coordination, Bramwell Simiyu, then wrote an advice to you, which was received by your office on the 22nd of November, 2023. And he gave a reason why he feels that this law should be overhauled. So I would want to know from you, what have you done on this particular advice that you've been given by your chief officer since November to date, because we are now in May.
Thank you, Senators. Governor, you definitely understand why we feel that this is the most important question to start with, because the people of Nairobi, following this conversation, would like to get some assurances that the governor of Nairobi and the government of Nairobi is in control of the situation, and it is perhaps doing better than the national government. We do not want you to be blamed for being clueless as the national government. You need to demonstrate to us that whatever you are doing is within the law.
Point of order, Chair. You cannot say national government is clueless. I think it is fair to use another term. Kindly.
The chair is never out of order.
No, I'm not saying you're out of order. I'm just saying you rephrase the word that you are using.
Chair, can I make a suggestion?
Senator Onyonke.
Honorable Cherargei, we can easily say that the government is confused.
No, Chair, but the national government have been working closely with the county government of Nairobi in alleviating the challenges of floods. You cannot say the government.
Let the governor demonstrate, and I would also want to hear from the governor
Maybe you can say,
what input the national government has had in terms of response to the disaster, so that we can figure out who is clueless between the national and the county government.
so I hope that word is dropped.
It is actually very important to know that the president is actually addressing floods in Nairobi this morning. And is in Mathare
At the
just
moment.
now.
Okay, let's come back to the governor's mandate, and let's not confuse it
And
with
the
the mandate of the
governor
national
add that
government.
Yeah, we are not dealing with the
Closely.
battle issues here. Let's be realistic.
Governor, through the chair, add that you have been working closely with the national government.
Please do not guide the witness, Governor. Governor, you may proceed. Senator Sifuna?
Chair, I really would want to dissuade members here from being advocates of any agency or entity.
And use the same advice to
But Chair, if you
Members,
mislead the
people
committee-
are dying in floods.
I know, that
People
is what
are
we are saying.
people.
Get away
That
to this
is what
People
we are
business
are
of
in
saying.
refugee
Chair,
camps.
Chair,
Our
Chair,
children
let us
cannot
also
go
be
back to
honest.
school.
Yes.
Since independence, this is the second time that schools have been suspended. Even in the 1982 coup, schools' education was not suspended. So
Chair,
let us
we are
deal
not-
with this as a matter of
Chair, with
national
all due respect,
importance.
we are not saying
Governor
it's an act of
Sakaja,
God.
please
It's an
proceed.
act of God. You cannot blame anybody.
Proceed, Governor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. There are quite a number of questions. Maybe I'll start with the last, which was from Senator Medho, about the memo from the Chief Officer, Disaster Management. That is 2nd October 2023. If you look at that memo, actually the copy you have possibly has my directions. And my directions there in hand is approved look-up memo for cabinet to be able to pass it. And the chief officer was talking about a technical working group to review the existing legislation that we're talking about. And then there are the specific issues that we have in that act. Yeah, the specific issues, of course, what we've gotten from stakeholders and experts in disaster management having a problem with this current law. Civil society, so there's the issue of stakeholder engagement. The second issue was it overlooks the evolving threat landscape and has focused a lot just on fires. Of course, fires are big, in Nairobi. In a month, sometimes you get up to 50 or 60. And so the memo talks about how, you see, the disposition of the county in terms of the approach we want to take in dealing with disaster is in conflict with that law. So we can't be implementing a law that we intend to repeal or in the process of reviewing.
Governor, let me stop you there.
Yeah.
You know at what point a memorandum is issued with respect to legislation.
Yes.
When the law is brought to a governor for assent, and the governor or the president has reservations to the law, they do a memorandum to the assembly. It is at that point that a memorandum is admissible. And for that memorandum to be overturned, it requires 2/3 of the members of the assembly. That is a proper place of a memo in legislation. This which comes later, once the law has been enacted, these are the thoughts of the executive. they do not stop the implementation of the law. And I think there's really no argument, because that's a process.
Yeah, the
as a governor, you can do a memo before you append your signature.
Yeah, the memo I'm talking about is different. It's not a legislative memorandum.
Now, this other memo you're describing, this is a thought process of the executive.
Yes.
And it only makes sense to the Senate if these thoughts are conveyed to the Assembly for repeal or amendment of the law.
Yes.
So basically, we are talking about intentions rather than action. So perhaps just to allow us to move on, because we've got a lot of papers here, because the question has been, what is the problem with the law? And that's what you're attempting to explain through the memo. Assuming there was that problem, and it establishes a council, which in my view, I see nothing wrong. It requires a disaster and emergency plan. So tell us, do you have a disaster and emergency plan in Nairobi City County?
Chair, we do have a disaster management plan in the county.
The third thing it requires is appointment of a director for disaster and emergency. Do we have a director for disaster and emergency?
Yes, we do.
What's the name of the director?
The chief officer can explain the entire establishment. We're going to come there because that's one of the questions asked by Senator Sifuna.
No, because there are four critical things about this law. Yeah. I'm just trying to figure out whether. So you've got a director for disaster and emergency.
There are two directors. There's one for disaster risk reduction. We'll give you the entire establishment. So it's not just one director. No, we're saying this law doesn't align with our current structure. That's why we're working on it.
No, but it's your structure to align with the law. It is not the law to align with your structure.
Yeah.
It's a law that drives your structure. It's not your structure that drives the law.
So as we're reviewing it, Chair, because you see, the implementer of the law is designed by the legislators. But when the implementers find a challenge with implementing it as it is, they propose amendments. And that is what we're doing.
Governor, are you sure if we went back to the records, we will not find that this law originated from the executive?
Possibly in 2015.
Yeah, so you be careful when you say that.
But this executive of 2023.
Yeah, the county government is a perpetual entity. And in fact, if you are coming up with questions 10 years later on a law that was passed and your predecessors have attempted to put in place some of the structures proposed, if you are finding challenges, what we're saying is that conversation cannot be had within cabinet. It should go to the assembly.
But it goes to the assembly after cabinet approval. The cabinet, that's what I'm explaining.
Fine, Governor, the disaster has befallen us. And I know you sitting in the Senate today is inconvenient because you ought to be out there leading rescue efforts.
As I've been.
So, beside all the English and the legalese and when memos should come, what is your current structure for responding to disasters and emergencies like the ones that are facing us today?
Okay, so I'll have the chief officer just come and explain the structure of the disaster sector. Then I shall go in and explain what we're doing with the current disaster. And then to explain to you our thinking. You know, even if it was legislated in 2015, that's why legislation is continuous. You do amendments, you change laws, you propose that this is not working, this is how we want it to work better. That is a continuous process that even the Senate is engaged in. So,
yes, and please be very precise. What's the name of the officer?
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Bramwell Simiu. I'm the County Chief Officer in charge of disaster management and coordination. And just to answer you on how you're dealing with this our current structure, we have the Disaster Risk Reduction Directorate, which focuses on mitigation and prevention of disasters. So this is a directorate that engages with the public and matters awareness, matters setting early warning systems, building community resilience through setting up some of the community volunteer response teams. Then we have the Directorate of Fire and Rescue, which really is a rescue agency, which focuses on responding to emergencies when called upon. The DRR unit also deals with matters of recovery, such as post-disaster support. Now, part of the reason we have challenges, Chairman and members, to implement this current law is that it's tailored around fire and rescue services. It does not give us the latitude to deal with matters mitigation or prevention or recovery adequately. And just to mention that this law was passed in 2015, but the disaster management sector was actually set up in 2018. Now, between 2018 and 2022, you will be aware, Chair, that we had a bit of political challenges, and for a large portion of that era, we didn't have a DG sort of looked at within that law, so we were not able to operationalize it during that time. So when His Excellency took over, of course, one of the intentions was to, excuse me, then to operationalize this act, but having the opportunity as a subject matter experts and together with my colleagues in the sector, we were able then to look at three critical things. One was the leadership of disaster management, whether this particular act provided for that adequately, and it was found that it was, there are major gaps in that. Secondly, we looked at the issue of command and control, as you correctly observed, and such as in the current situation that we find ourselves in. When you look at the issue of command and control, the law does not give us a proper framework that allows us to be able to deal with incidents. That act also does not capture the full scope of hazards that we face, so that you look at it as more of a response to fire act, as opposed to becoming a modern dynamic.
Bramwell, you're taking us back to where I wanted us to exit. I no longer want the argument on the advantages or disadvantages of that law.
Okay.
I just want to understand, how are you currently responding to disasters and emergencies?
Yes.
Particularly the flooding disaster that we have right now.
Yes.
You have explained the directorate.
Yes.
So you have explained the tactical or operational bit of it.
Yes, Chair.
At the strategic level,
yes,
what do we have?
So as His Excellency mentioned, despite not operationalizing the law, we actually have this multi-sectoral committee that consists of all the line essential services sectors. So we have public health, we have works, we have mobility, we have environment. I chair that committee. It also ropes in the sub-county administration team and the Ngao team as part of that team. So this is a team that...
When is the last time you met?
We met, I think, 2 weeks ago. We met 2 weeks ago.
That's
a week ago.
That's still at operational level. I'm looking for strategic direction.
Yes.
Because ultimately,
yes,
I want to see how the governor fits into that structure.
So that committee is actually convened by His Excellency the Governor and the Regional Commissioner, Mr. Kate. But then the delegated day-to-day management of the council, I chair that as the chair of the...
So that's more or less the council. It's only that it's a governor who chairs it.
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yes.
So it appears the problem is that it was designated to be chaired by the deputy governor, because if you're saying that exists with the regional commissioner, police commandant, and all those things, it's basically what is in the law.
It's more or less the same.
It's more or less the same.
But
the only
no
difference is the chair.
Yeah. No, I mean, the Act doesn't recognize the regional commander, for instance. Yeah. It doesn't bring in the police commander. It's at county level. So it's a similar thinking in terms of the kind of people you need around the table, but without those specific names. So when Kate sits there, the council, if you look at it clearly, has no regional commissioner. Nairobi is a bit different, where our regional commissioner, Nairobi is a region and a county at the same time. You know, so there are those differences, but operationally, even as recently as last week, I was chairing the same committee. But what we found, Chair, is that just as we're moving with the barrow system, it is more practical and impactful when we step down these teams to the sub-county. And so we have empowered the sub-county teams to have the machinery, the resources, the cash in terms of interest with the sub-county admins. They sit with the DCCs, they sit with the disaster management officer at the sub-county, together with the different agencies, so Red Cross, the police, all entities there, say, okay, there's this problem in Runda, for instance, or in Madare. We need to respond to it, and they're able to do it without having to come to City Hall. So what we have at City Hall is just the strategic leadership. Receives the reports from these places, anything that needs to be escalated is then escalated to us. I can give you an example. What we're dealing with, for instance, in Dagoretti South, in Udhiruru Mitu yesterday, were landslides, you know. The response to the landslides there in Udhiruru Mitu ward and what needs to be done is very different from what we're dealing with in Mabatini, in Madare. But the Mabatini team in Madare has the capacity, the resources, and the ability to solve the problem without this other one interfering. So, Chair, with the current disaster, because that is how we are currently structured, with the current disaster, for instance, I've been to all parts of the city, as you're saying rightfully, even today. I think this is the second time I've worn a suit. It was just today in the Labor Day, because I had to go. And even after that, I went straight to the ground, Kware and Viwandani. I've been to Mukuru, Kwaruben. I've been to all these places, listening to the people, taking food supplies, giving them, you know, mattresses and blankets, and addressing certain challenges. In Enterprise Road, for instance, where it has been flooding. And that's why we've included in that council, you know, in quotes, Kura and Kenha. You know, they're not provided for there. But all of the challenges you see, like Thika Road being cut off today, UN Avenue being closed this morning, is not a Nairobi County road. You know, it's a Kura road or a Kenha road. And you need them all to be able to engage with you on a day-to-day. We have made the strategic decision, for instance, to reduce the number of these camps. Because what you find, and I'll give you an example of Madare Vocational Center. During the day, you have 1,500 people who are at that camp. But at night, they're only 60. But during the day is when well-wishers are coming, when supplies are coming, when Dish and Account is offering lunch. And so when that is happening, people come. But at night, they find a way to go and sleep. So in this certain case, we don't want to create permanent, you know, IDP camps. And what we've pushed now at the national level, when we've had the whole of nation approach, and what I've advised them, is because we have the lists of those who've been affected, that have been prepared jointly by the chiefs, the assistant county commissioners, my ward admins, the sub-county administrators, and the ward administrators. We know who are those affected from the 60,000 families. Even if you're sorted at that point, leave alone as it keeps adding up, all of those people need to get a cash transfer, which is what we have pushed as Nairobi County. If you give them a cash transfer and the resources and rent for a number of months, the resilience of our people is that they shall find a place. They will find a place to stay and to move. But the dependency that you want to keep them in one place so that you keep giving them relief food and government then is seen to be working is not proper. Remember, there's a social construct that these people have. You cannot remove people from Madari and take them to a camp in Roysambu and expect them now again to integrate from there. There had been a proposal to create transitional housing. This is a proposal from the national government that part of the land, for instance, at Madare Hospital or the land at NYS has, you know, that they provide this housing, construct temporary shelters, and have people come and stay there. And the county has been very opposed to that. Rather, we wanted to improve that argument and tell them, look, you see, a bigger problem.
Therein lies a problem.
Yeah.
That the national government is making proposals which do not sit well with the county.
Yes.
And yet this council was supposed to be the point of convergence for the two levels of government. And that's why we're still pushing for implementation of the law.
Where the decisions are being made is above this council, you know? Yeah. So the kind of
Can I ask Governor?
Yeah. Just let me finish.
Just let me ask a question. Yeah. I agree with some of the sentiments. I just want to understand, have you shared these things you are telling us with the national government? Because we have said, even from the other side of the coalition, that you cannot tell people from Madare to look for higher ground.
Yeah.
And we keep hearing the president pronouncing himself. So you are admitting to the cluelessness of the national government that the senator was alluding to. Have you advised the president that this cannot work in Nairobi? I just want to know if you have shared those sentiments.
Chair, in point of order, I think we owe Kenyans to conduct proceedings that are decent, within our standing orders, and with respect. I don't think throwing words and trying to justify
So far,
coalition is
nothing has been said that is disrespectful.
I know
What
don't
we
allow
are,
me. I'm worried about your secretary general.
what we are establishing.
Kindly, can you hear me out so that you rule?
Senator Cherargei, what we are establishing is a nexus between the national and county governments, and we would have expected that this council,
let us use parliamentary language. That is my request.
would be the meeting of minds, would be the point of convergence. I think we are prosecuting this not for our coalition,
No, Chair, don't
but for
be
the people,
intimidated by your secretary
but
general.
for the people
Kindly,
of Nairobi.
Can you rise above partisan interests?
Senator Fatuma Dulo.
Please, can you rise above partisan interests?
Senator Fatuma Dulo.
Chair, sorry we are taking too long on this matter, which is also very important. But I think we have been explained what are the challenges the county is facing vis-a-vis the current legislation. We want to move forward so that we can be able to finish this in time. Can the county tell us when they are going to operationalize this particular legislation? Then we can be able to follow it up and make sure that Kenyans are safe in Nairobi. I think that should be the best way to go.
I think what's remaining, Governor, is what Senator Dulo has asked, but really for now, for the comfort of the leadership of Nairobi and the people of Nairobi, that commitment, because what is worrying me is that it appears, for example, the cash transfers, where would they originate from? From the county or from the national government or from the disaster fund? So if they're coming from the national government, there needs to be a point of conversation, a point of convergence, because I do not want the governor of Nairobi to be called to meetings in official residences to discuss his constitutional mandate. As a Senate, we must stand firm and say that the governor of Nairobi is bound by certain laws, is bound by certain responsibilities that are constitutional, and we must allow him to execute without being bent this way or that way.
Chair.
But, if you do not stick to the law, you will be called for meetings over cups of tea, etc.
Yeah.
Things must be institutional, things must be consistent, and they must be predictable. So please just summarize your submission so that we go back to the accounting issues.
Chair, I can give you assurance, and the people of Nairobi, that this governor of Nairobi is not bent this way or that way. That one does not, is not the case with this governor of Nairobi. In fact, in many instances, we're the ones who are guiding some of these responses by even the national government. This council that you're saying, Chair, and I agree with you, it's good to institutionalize, and because in as much as we've been operating it, it shouldn't be ad hoc. There I agree with you. But now the whole of nation approach sits actually above this council. That is chaired by the president, and myself, I'm there, and we have the PSs and cabinet secretaries from national government and the CECs from Nairobi. And that is where we've sat, and it's at that forum where I've explained to them that the approach being proposed might work in the rural areas, but for the capital, for Nairobi, we need a different approach. Not just because of the resilience, but just the social structure of our people. I'm very grateful. The national government has actually been very cooperative in terms of this current disaster. We've been able to guide them on where they need to, do some infrastructural work. The DG of Kenha, has been coming to City Hall. The DG of Kura, they've actually surprised. The default disposition of government normally is to have disdain to counties, and you know that. But on this particular instance, and I don't think it's because of my personal relationship with these people, they've actually deferred a lot to the county government. For instance, the engineers that we've sent joint teams between ourselves and Kura to assess quickly, interventions on some of these bridges, some that the county is doing, some that they are doing, has been exceptional. So, Chair, I agree with you as a legislator that the law needs to be implemented as it is. Those who passed it in 2015, never implemented it. In 2015, 16, 17, 2018 didn't implement it, 19, 20, 21, 22. Now when we come in 23, we know the kind of different entity we want to raise. If you look, I think we went on a visit, you must have been there when I was in the Senate, to Vancouver. I don't know if you're there. Yes, Senator Dulo and Senator Cherargei. You remember the structure of disaster response in the city of, in the state, in British Columbia and the entire province. And that they have an entity, the same way we have Nairobi Water Company, that you have an entity that now looks at disaster throughout the year, looks at mitigation, has the dashboards, has the response. Our emergency operations center, for instance, that we have in Nairobi is then coordinated with GSM. We know where the ambulances are. For now, we are using a short code number 1508. For anyone who's in trouble, they're calling it. That is the direction we want to go to. So even as you operationalize this council, which we will do because it's the law that is there now, we are still developing the legislation to create this semi-autonomous entity that then focuses on mitigation and then response, Chair.
I think you have dealt with the issues, save for the funding. Part of the requirement was to establish a fund, a disaster and emergency fund, which I believe is separate from the emergency fund that is established by the PFM. Were you able to come up with regulations for this fund, or that has not been operationalized?
Not yet, not yet. That has not been operationalized.
But the emergency fund exists.
It's not a fund. It's actually a vote to the sector. So the sector has a budget.
No. There's an emergency fund that is the 2% term of revenues that is required under the PFM.
Yes, that is there.
That has been established.
That has been established. It's not been resourced to that level, 2% of the revenue. Of course, because of obvious challenges. You look at, 2%, the exchequer releases, the budget that you've set up, the things that need to be done. So it's not resourced to that extent, but the fund does exist. The interventions that you're saying, for instance, the 7 billion that national government is talking about, that should also include these cash transfers, that will come from that national kitty. That is what we pushed. That is the position we put, because they have a contingent fund of 7 billion, And we told them last year during El Nino, for instance, and Nairobi didn't flood, was because of the investment we had put in to the Green Army and equipment, and Nairobi County didn't get a shilling during that response. Possibly we were victims of our success, because they said, look, Nairobi is working, and I don't know where the money went to, but we didn't get resources that time. This time we're saying, first of all, before even giving us additional money, give us our exchequer release. The last exchequer Nairobi got is February. Yet we're dealing with a crisis every day, mainly through all source revenue. Because even when you send the exchequer release to the city of 1.7 billion, 1.3 is salaries, we've not even put fuel. We've not spoken about the other recurrent issues. So all of this that you're seeing happening when we're going around, with our DMOs, our community health promoters who are helping cook for these people in those camps, is just from our own source revenue.
Okay, let's bring this to a close. Senator Cherargei, then Senator Sifuna.
When are you going to operationalize that? Looking at the challenges we're facing right now and making immediate intervention, give us timeline within which you should be able to.
Senator, you are not on record.
Oh, sorry.
Just repeat that. Just switch on your mic. Just repeat what you said so that it's captured.
Yeah, Governor, I'm saying, when are you thinking of operationalizing this whole process? Because it's really very important. You have seen the gaps, and Kenyans require that intervention as urgently as possible, and we must have the structure in place. Timeline within which you can be able to implement. Thank you.
Through the chair.
Should he respond, or it's related?
Okay. It's the same thing with the
then Senator Cherargei proceed so that the governor.
Through the chair, thank you, Governor, for highlighting the flourishing symbiotic relationship with your national government. One concern only is, Governor, one is how long will it take? Have you drafted the law? At what stage is it? The county's solicitor is here, because it's important. What law are you using at the moment? Because as per the law, the emergency fund should have at least 2% of the county revenue. Number two, Chair, living at the moment, I'd ask you this question, but I think because of explanation of technicalities through the chair, how many people, not across the country, we have lost in Nairobi City County through the ongoing floods across the country? Number two, how many Kenyans are in distress because of the effects of floods? Number three, how many Kenyans are displaced within the city? And finally, through the chair, because this is a live issue, it is an ongoing issue, how many schools or learning institutions have been affected across the county, the learning institutions that have been affected more so. And Chair, I heard him, with your indulgence, that he is repairing 17 bridges. I don't know how, maybe he can assist us, because some of these roads, Governor, you'll agree with me, most of them are under Kenya Urban Roads Authority, the others are through Kenya, others are through Kera. How are you able to repair these 17 bridges? Is it those within the informal settlement, or even within the roads that are being managed and run by Kura, Kera, and Kenya? And whether there has been support through the Ministry of Transport. I know the person in charge there is more active in FINROLs and Arambes, but how have you gotten that support to ensure they put in place? I thank you, Chair.
Senator Sifuna, would you want to ask the question now, or you want the governor to first respond to?
Let him respond to those ones.
Not the point of order I wanted to raise.
No, it's not a point of order. I take my job very seriously. I have serious work to undertake here, and I'll not be drawn into those sideshows.
Okay, Governor, respond to the two. I think was responding to the last part of his submission. Just a very brief response.
Chair,